everyone, and welcome to Positive by Design. Good people talking about real shit and easy to implement success methods. Hosted by Social Jane Media, brought to you by yours truly, Sarah Glenn. I am the creator and CEO of Social Jane Media, a certified social media marketing expert and the branding specialist that many entrepreneurs turn to. If you're looking for inspiration from other entrepreneurs and high-vibing humans, you're in the right place. So settle in, get comfy, and let's get started. All right, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about perception and how it literally creates the reality that you live in. And, this is really fascinating because it intersects psychology, and we're going to talk a little bit about business and, of course, personal growth, self-development. All of that kind of goes hand in hand. So today we're really going to dive into kind of that profound concept of perception and how it does shape our reality. So welcome on to Positive by Design. I'm your host, Sarah Glenn, and I truly am so grateful that you're here listening to these episodes. I've been doing this for a couple months now, and honestly, I can say that doing this podcast is one of the most rewarding aspects of my business that I have done. I am so glad that I took the plunge and did something that really scared the shit out of me, because doing this podcast has allowed me to connect with a lot of incredible people, connect with people that, would not have been in my realm otherwise. So being able to come on and share with you guys about anything and everything when it comes to business and branding and life and mindset and all of the things. And I can just see how this podcast is going to evolve over time. I was just having a conversation with my husband yesterday. And you guys, if you know me or you know my husband, you know that one of his signature traits is his deep, deep, sexy voice. Oh my gosh, his voice is like Barry White. It's just, it's awesome. So I was talking with him and I'm like, I actually could really see having some sprinkled in episodes of, us as a couple. So we can really help talk to the woman who maybe is feeling unsupported by her husband or her family or, her spouse. Like it, obviously, depending on who your significant other might be. But anyone who is feeling unsupported or feeling like people in their household just don't get what they're doing. Like when you decide to get into entrepreneurship, it can be very lonely, and it can be very confusing for a lot of people in your household, because all of a sudden you're on the computer all the time and you're having conversations, really deep conversations with people that are, relatively strangers, right? But that's the power of social media. That's the power of networking. And that's the power of something like a podcast. It can connect you to people that 24 hours ago weren't in your world at all. And it's just really fucking cool. So from the bottom of my heart, I'm so grateful for you guys tuning in and listening to these episodes, because they're just going to keep getting better and better as I evolve, as my business evolves, and as we sort of grow and evolve together. So I hope that you're getting a lot of value out of these. So today we're going to talk about perception. And, perception is a pretty complex kind of cognitive process. It involves sensory information, right? But it also really pulls from prior knowledge, like the beliefs and experiences that we have had up to this moment will factor into how we perceive something. And I know, like, mentally, we probably don't think of it that way. We're just like, oh, well, I see this thing and I see it. So I see it. Okay, well, but if you were standing next to somebody and let's say you're both looking at the same object, you will have two different ways of describing that object. You will see the object differently. You will see it from a slightly different angle. And some of this has to do with like the ways that we soak up information, like whether you're an auditory learner, a visual learner, kinesthetic, like Some of our perception has to do with how we physically like receive and soak up information, but it also has to do with our prior knowledge of the beliefs we have and the experiences that we've had. It definitely becomes part of the equation whenever we're going through that cognitive process of being like, okay, what is this thing that I'm looking at? So it's the prior beliefs and experiences, I think, is sort of the unseen aspect to perception. And it really does play a crucial role in how we understand and interact with the environment around us. Um, it influences our thoughts and our emotions and our actions, right? Like it absolutely will. And it will really the perception from previous beliefs and experiences will absolutely become part of how you react to things as well. So, like let's say you are having an interaction and you're on a call and you're closing a sale, right? Well, the perception is that, maybe the call is going really well, you're connecting well with the client, but maybe on the other end, you have to be aware of what the perception is from the other person as well. Where are they at in their life? What kind of prior experiences have they had? What might be stopping them from saying yes to working with you? It's most likely some prior belief or experience that they're going to have to work through in order to do something new and say yes to working with you, buying your product, getting in your programs, like any of those things. So the process of perception, I mean, it's influenced by a lot of different factors and cultural backgrounds, personal biases, memory, like all of these things come into play. So if you're on that sales call and by the end of the call, like it's not going the way you are expecting it to go, don't take it personally. Instead, be inquisitive. Like, why is it that the perception on their end isn't what you've been seeing? Why is it? Maybe it's because of some sort of past belief, past expectation, some personal bias. Maybe they're not the one that actually feels like they have the power to make decisions in their own life because they have to get it okayed with their spouse or something first. And nothing against that. Like I love to involve my husband in decisions, especially if it involves spending money on something, because we both work hard for our money, and I do it out of a mutual respect. I don't do it for his permission. And there's a big difference, and that is the perception, right? That's exactly what it is. It's the perception. When I go to have the conversation with him about investing in my business, or maybe we're talking about going on a trip or something that typically, in a lot of circumstances, can create heated conversations. We'll just put it that way, especially when you're talking about money and stuff like that, it can create heated conversations. But my perception of that conversation is not that I'm asking his permission. It's that I respect him enough to be the other half of this relationship. So I want to talk to him about it. And by having that perception of this is the reason I'm having this conversation, it really changes how I show up to that conversation. I don't show up to it as like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous because I have to ask his permission to spend this money. No, I show up to that conversation fully prepared to have all of the energy behind why I want what I want. And that knowingness, that confidence, it allows him to be more confident in the conversation too. Because if I was to show up to it just like, oh my gosh, I don't really know if this is right for me, I don't know if I should do it, he would match that energy and be like, yeah, well, then you shouldn't. Like, why would we spend the money? But if I show up to the conversation having that perception that I'm here to be respectful of him being the other entity in this relationship. And so I want to confidently have a conversation about, what this looks like for us moving forward. That conversation is way different, right? So, and it really is up to individual interpretation when it comes to perception in general. Like I mentioned earlier, we could be looking at the exact same thing, and each of us would have different ways of describing it. We would probably see it from slightly different angles, because obviously, unless we were standing exactly in the same spot, we would see different sides, different angles, right? So, as a result of this, different people have different perspectives, and that's a really cool thing. Um, it allows us to have this level of diversity that makes the exploration process of getting to know somebody and selling a product and building a business and creating a community. It really allows you to hone in on all of those different factors that just make up the whole human and make a really, really unique perspective. So, understanding perception and reality. Perception is obviously how we sort of see the world around us, right? It determines our beliefs and our attitudes and our actions, and ultimately it influences the reality that we are experiencing, which, to touch on, like the universal laws and the mindset piece, which is a lot of what I talk about in the podcast and sometimes inside of the Social Jane community. But the reality of what we are experiencing, it can be changed. And that's what's so fucking cool about the mind and about just life in general. If you are not experiencing a life that you enjoy, a life that you love, you have the power to choose differently. You have the power to perceive differently. Honestly, decide what you want in life and then just say no to all the other stuff that isn't that. And I know that that may not happen overnight, and that's okay. But perception, when you really boil it down, it's self-awareness. Self-awareness is at the top of everything that we are talking about whenever we talk about mindset stuff. If you don't have the self-awareness, you're not going to even be able to recognize that you are perceiving something in a negative manner or in a way that is, not conducive to success. Perception, because it's influenced so heavily by our past experiences and maybe our background and like the emotional state that we're in, it's hard to know whether it's true or not, which is why self-awareness is so important. Sometimes I perceive a interaction or some sort of just engagement, and if I have a negative connotation to it, or just I perceive it not in a good way, sometimes I have to stop and think and be like, why is that? Why? Is it actually bad? Is something actually wrong? 9 times out of 10, no, it's just my perception. It's maybe that I'm not having a good day, or that maybe I have a past trauma that I haven't really unearthed that is kind of bubbling up and creating the perception of what I'm seeing. So that's why perception, I mean, it can be pretty deceiving, to be honest. And why self-awareness is so vital when it comes to just paying attention to perception in general, and that it truly does shape your reality. I read this recently. It's the, what is it? I wrote it down. Our perception influenced by our past experiences, and it's known as the perceptual filter. Understanding the filter helps us recognize that people can have different views of the same reality, leading to different responses and different behaviors. Honestly, I've experienced this plenty of times where I come across somebody and I'm like, how on earth did they get this out of that? I'm like, we both experienced the same thing. We both read the same book. We both did the same training. How did they get this out of that? Like, how did that result come from that? Perception. That's how they saw it differently. They received the information differently because of things like how we were raised was different, how we learn is different, how we perceive is different. So having this self-awareness that perception shapes everybody's reality, right? Not just yours, everybody's. It really can give you a lot of insight and understanding into how and why people make decisions the way they do sometimes. And it really, really helps remove the personal factor um, of taking something personally when it doesn't go your way. Like when you're in that sales call and it's not going your way, and by the end of the call you don't have the sale. Okay, well, what's the perception from the other end? And what is your perception of that actual occurrence? Is it really a bad thing that you didn't get the sale? Maybe that's not the right person for you, or maybe that person's just not ready yet. And if you had gotten the sale, you'd be dragging them along and they wouldn't be doing the work or getting the results. So, like, that's not good either. So, you really have to shift your perspective to there's a reason for everything happening and occurring the way that it does. And most of the time, it has nothing to do with you. So, perceiving that everybody's reality is created by themselves, it's created by their past experiences, their cultural backgrounds, whether they're having a good day or a bad day. It really has nothing to do with you. And removing that sort of taking it personally factor is huge. It's huge because then you can move on from that so-called failed sales call to a whole other conversation within minutes and not feel like you have to talk yourself back up into, being the CEO of your business. You can just be like, you know what? That was a really good learning experience. That person's just not ready to work with me yet. They need to be nurtured a little bit longer. Awesome. I'm going to move on to the next conversation. And it doesn't stall you. When I was first starting out this whole building a business thing, oh my gosh, if I had any kind of negative, what I perceived as negative, conversation with somebody, or, the outcome it wasn't what I was expecting, what I wanted, sometimes I would need like a good 30 minutes to an hour before my blood pressure would like go back down and I wouldn't feel just this sort of fight or flight sensation, like the butterflies in your stomach where you're just like, oh, I feel like I want to throw up because that conversation did not go as planned and I feel so blindsided. I don't have that anymore, like ever. If I have some sort of conversation with somebody and it goes so sideways and I'm like, whoa, shit, I didn't expect that to happen. It doesn't affect me the same way because my perception of that conversation, my perception of the person on the other end is completely different. I'm so much more self-aware and I'm so much more understanding that, people are having their own human experience right alongside us, and it is completely different than what we're experiencing. So having that awareness is huge. So let's talk briefly about how like entrepreneurs and business owners can leverage perception to their advantage in building and growing their businesses. Perception plays a big role in how customers perceive and interact with your brand, right? With your business. So if you want to create a positive perception of your business, focus on things like being authentic and showing up with a level of transparency, obviously that you're comfortable with. We don't need to be airing out all your dirty laundry, but having that transparency that you are leading by example. Like that's what being a true leader is. You might fuck up sometimes, but own it. Own your shit and let people know, hey, I tried this. I messed up. It didn't work. It was a little bit of a flop, but guess what? I'm going to pivot and I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to succeed each time a little bit because I know that the perception of this consistency, this authenticity, and this transparency is going to help solidify and create a really honest relationship between me and you. Like that's how perception can really help build a strong brand and business. consistently delivering on what you're going to promise, the things that you value. Like if you say you're going to show up and you're going to do a podcast every week, you better fucking show up and do a podcast every week. Not because someone's holding your feet to the fire saying you should do it, but because you promised yourself and your audience that you would do it. When you live up to those promises and you stay consistent, the perception of your brand in your business is that you are reliable, that you can be trusted to do what you say you're going to do. So you absolutely can shift the perspective of your brand and business by taking actions that create the perception that you're wanting. And it's not about manipulation. Like, it is so far from manipulation. It's actually about honesty and transparency and authenticity. So yeah, focusing on those pieces, it's going to build the loyalty and trust that you want in your brand and your business. So the next time you're having a conversation with a potential customer, client, another business bestie, whoever, your husband, whatever, the next time you're having a conversation with someone and it's not really going the way that you're expecting it to go, think back to this episode and think about how deceiving perception can be sometimes, and just understand that everybody is viewing life and circumstance from their own unique lens. So give them a little bit of grace, and always, always give them a lot of love. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And again, bottom of my heart, so much gratitude that you show up and you listen to these episodes on Positive by Design. And, as always, to get plugged into the community and get a lot of sort of hands-on branding and marketing tips, I would love to see you inside of the Social Jane community on Facebook. That was so much fun. I hope you found this episode helpful. If you want to get a shout out or maybe even inspire a fellow entrepreneur, go ahead and take a screenshot of yourself listening to this episode and tag us in your stories at Social Jane Media. Positive by Design is brought to you by Sarah Glenn, CEO of Social Jane Media, the branding and business coaching agency that teaches you how to discover your authentic brand, lead with value, and build the business you desire. If you're ready for more, head over to the Social Jane community. Link is in the show notes. I'll see you inside.